All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We're doing an introduction to Canvas new quizzes today. I am Katie Scapin. I am the Canvas Service Manager here at Case Western Reserve University, and I'm part of the Teaching and Learning Technologies team, which resides under University Technology. We are going to talk about some basics of using new quizzes today. So as you start your exploration, start your journey, this is where we're focusing our attention today. So I'd like to start off with defining the timeline for the transition at CWRU. Then we'll talk about some of the differences between the existing classic quizzes and then the new quizzes tool that is being introduced. We'll talk a little bit about how to actually get started with new quizzes. How do you create one? Where do you go to find things? How do you migrate classic quizzes to new quizzes? And then we'll also take a look at resources and support for this transition so that you have additional assistance if you need it. So let's start right up with that transition timeline. We are currently in the transition period. So prior to spring 2024, we had new quizzes as an option. You really needed to go and find it and turn it on, and you could explore it on your own if you were interested in doing so. We are now past that point. We are in the transition. This is the time to actively start switching from classic quizzes to new quizzes. Now, the time frame we have on here is through spring 2026, because at that time, we are going to stop the allowance for creation of classic quizzes. So what that means is if you have any quizzes you need to create in Canvas, that must be done using the new quizzes tool. Classic quizzes will still be available. So if you have those classic quizzes, you can still give those to your students. You just can't build new quizzes using the classic quizzes feature. At some undetermined point in the future, classic quizzes will no longer be available in Canvas. So all of this is being led by Instructure, the makers of Canvas. They have stated that they will, at some future date yet to be determined, sunset classic quizzes. So that will go away. We will no longer have access. Everybody must be using new quizzes. Now, I present this timeline to you. It is tentative. We've adjusted the dates many times historically just based off of information from Instructure, attitudes on the Case Western Reserve campus and how we're actually making the transition. So this is subject to change. I do have a resource at the end for our website where we have the most recent version of this will always be posted. So if we do make changes, that'll be updated there as well. So we are in that transition. What does that mean for you? Well, new quizzes is here. It's time to make the move. There is a bunch of new and exciting stuff in new quizzes that didn't exist in classic quizzes, or maybe it did, but it wasn't the best. It's been improved with new quizzes. So first exciting thing, we have new question types. There's a categorization question type, a hotspot question type, ordering, and what they call a stimulus question, which would present like a block of text, and then you can associate questions with that text or other content. So kind of a new organizational feature in your quiz, that stimulus question type, but also new question types in general. In addition to that, they have improved the shuffling option so that it's not just shuffle everything or nothing. You can now shuffle questions or answers. You don't have to do all of one or the other. So that is exciting as well. There's also additional controls over the feedback that students get after they've completed their quiz attempt. So what they see afterwards. You really have a lot of options now. There's a lot of little toggles and checkboxes and things for you to adjust for what students see once they've completed their attempt. Speaking of attempts, you now have the option to build on the last attempt. So what that means is you can have students take a quiz once, maybe they get half of it right, half of it wrong, and you can say, hey, let's reopen that and allow you to build on your last attempt. So they don't have to re-answer everything. They can actually go in and kind of adjust their answers, their prior answers, to build along and submit again for a second attempt. There's also now an option for a waiting period between attempts. So if you want to give students a cool down period between attempts that they take, you can set that up as well. In addition to that, there is now the option to set a different point value for quiz questions and then the overall quiz percentage or total points for the final grade. I'll talk about that a little bit. Some folks really love this. Some folks are kind of about it, but I think it's exciting. Something that folks have asked for forever from Canvas, you can now print new quizzes and the answer key. So if you need to give an offline exam, you can do so. And then they've also improved the accommodation features. Previously in classic quizzes, you had to set accommodations per quiz per student. Now you can set it up per student for all quizzes in the course. So if you know someone has an accommodation for 1.5 times extra time, you can set that up once and let it go for the rest of the semester. We do have a roadmap, or Instructure has a roadmap rather, available for you if you're curious about learning more about what is planned to come. There are always improvements being made to new quizzes, and there is some exciting stuff on the roadmap. So I will mention a couple of those things as we go through this, but that's available for you if you're interested. So there are some current limitations with new quizzes. Some of these things are just differences between classic quizzes and new quizzes, and that's just how it is because it's an entirely different tool. Some of these are actual limitations that are in development. So let's go through some of these. The very first thing that you should know is new quizzes cannot be reverted back to classic quizzes. So if you build your final, for example, in new quizzes and you're like, I don't want to use this anymore, I want to go back to classic quizzes, you would have to recreate that entire quiz in classic quizzes. There's no backward movement. So once you're in new quizzes, you're stuck with new quizzes on the quiz level at least. One other thing that is a limitation is that the designer role does not have access to new quizzes. This is a known issue. Instructure hopefully will be resolving this, but right now it does not work. So if you have any designers in your course, you need to change their role to grader or TA or something like that for them to have access. Right now, there are no anonymous survey functionality. There's no anonymous questions. We do have other options available. We have a resource linked here for that. So that would be something like Qualtrics or Google Forms. You can still use classic quizzes and their survey functionality that is still available. This is one of the things that is on the roadmap. So hopefully at the end of the year or early next year, they'll have this released and available to us so we can do surveys in new quizzes, but currently it's not there yet. One thing to note is that if you were a big fan of multiple drop-down or fill-in-the-blank questions, those have been merged into the fill-in-the-blank question type. The fill-in-the-blank question type now allows you to select what that blank looks like. So that includes drop-downs, that includes actual filling in. And then just by default, you can add multiple blanks or drop-downs or whatever it might be. So it kind of just consolidated things there. Speaking of consolidation, practice quizzes have been consolidated into new quizzes. In classic quizzes, there was a little drop down where you could toggle between the two. In new quizzes, practice quizzes are just ungraded new quizzes that don't go to the grade book. So they are available to create. It's just not called a practice quiz anymore. One other thing to note is that there is no partial credit for ordering or categorization questions. I don't know if they plan on fixing this. I think it might just be the design of the question type, but something to be aware of if you do utilize those questions. And then, like the roadmap, we also have a feature comparison document that Instructure has put together. So that will tell you the differences between classic and new quizzes. So you can see what existed, what exists, what might be missing, where that parity is at. And then we also have a consideration page. That's a CWRU specific page that I update. And it really just has kind of these tips, tricks, things that you might trip up on if you're making the transition, just things to be aware of. So fantastic resource. I do recommend checking that out. So let's talk a little bit about migrating quizzes. So a lot of folks already have fantastic classic quizzes set up in their Canvas courses, and they might be curious about moving that content into new quizzes. What does that effort look like? How do I do that? I already have this. Don't make me reinvent it all. Luckily, there are two different ways that you can migrate classic quizzes into new quizzes in Canvas. The first of which is to move individual quizzes. Easy enough. That's a one-to-one conversion. So if you have a classic quiz, you can migrate it into new quizzes. There's also an option when you do a course copy or a course import. Typically, you would do this at the beginning of the year, but you can do it at any time. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to move all of your classic quizzes in a course into the new quizzes format. So there's a little checkbox. I will show you what that looks like, but that's definitely a handy way to just get everything migrated over. The one thing I will say about migration is when you do that, always double check the migrated quiz. So check the new quiz, see what it looks like, double check that everything came over correctly, particularly like images or files. We haven't seen issues with that in a while, but like 2 years ago, that's a problem. So just double check it, make sure that everything is correct, make sure that your point values look good. We just want you to be aware of what that could look like. So that will also depend on, like if you had any fill in the blank questions, those will be migrated to the, not fill in the blank, fill in multiple blanks or the drop-down question types. Those will be migrated to the new fill in the blanks question type. So just verify that that is set up correctly and looks good. There is a dedicated preview button. I will show you that because that is definitely useful. So we can take a look at that once we get into the demo. So building new quizzes. This is the exciting stuff. So I want to jump in. I want to talk about building quizzes, and then we're actually going to get into Canvas and take a look and talk about how you go through the process and migrate and all that good stuff. So let's talk about building. The basics for building a new quiz are very, very similar to building a classic quiz. Very similar to everything in Canvas. The first thing you're going to do is create your quiz shell. That's the plus quiz button. Pretty typical stuff. Right now, if you click the plus quiz button in a Canvas course, it should prompt you choosing between a classic quiz and a new quiz. If you've already selected one of those and there's a little checkbox to remember the choice, you might not see this. If that is the case and you don't see the option to create a new quiz, let us know and we can definitely get that resolved for you. So we create the quiz shell. We then go into the quiz shell and we adjust the quiz details. So that's like the name, the availability, if you have a due date. This is also where you set the total points for the quiz as they would appear in the gradebook. So if your final is worth 100 points, this is where you would put in 100. After we set that up, we will then go into build the quiz. So that's where we go in and set up our question and put in our answers and all of the options. This is also where we can provide feedback for questions and all that good stuff. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. This is where we can set points per question. So, like I mentioned, new quizzes has a difference between how it handles points than classic quizzes does. There is an overall score for the quiz, which appears in the gradebook. And then there's individual points assigned per question. And we'll talk about that in just a sec with a little more clarity. But for now, just know that you can set an overall point value and then points per question. Once we have our questions built, we can then go in and adjust any settings. So that would be things like shuffling, multiple attempts, what feedback students see, time limits, things like that. That's also where we can add accommodation. So if students have any accommodations, we can set those up as well. And then we have the moderation page, and that's where we can do those accessibility accommodations. So we will take a look at that in just a moment. Before we do, I want to point out that I have some tips here for how to navigate when building. I will point these out as we go through the demo. The first thing is that It's like a two-step process. You get to the details page, and then there's a new button that says build. And build will take you into the question builder and the settings and the moderation. If you want to skip that details page and get just to the question builder, you can do that by selecting the three dots next to a quiz name. And that'll make more sense once we get into Canvas. One thing to note is that the quiz details page and the quiz builder page can have different names for the quiz. I don't know why they don't sync up, but just be aware of that if you call something like quiz 2 on both places, and then, oh, just kidding, maybe this is like quiz 4, and you update it on the details page, it'll still say quiz 2 on the quiz builder page. So be mindful of that. I will point out where those are as well. One thing that is kind of my pet peeve right now, once you add a question, you cannot change the question type. So if you start building a multiple choice question and you go, oh, wait a minute, this would be better as a true false question, you have to delete the question and create a new true false question. In classic quizzes, you could just select a new question from the dropdown and it would just switch the question type, not in new quizzes. I do like to point out that there's a done button to save your changes when you're working with a question. However, if you click off of the question, it'll automatically save. So you don't necessarily have to be as proactive as you were with classic quizzes with that silly little update button. But just be mindful that there is a button if you're someone that likes that confirmation. And then finally, to get back to your course, once you're in the quiz builder, you can use the return button. I will show you exactly where that is in just a second. Before we get into that, I do want to take a sec to talk specifically about the points situation. So up till now, I have told you that you can have an overall score for the quiz that appears in the gradebook, and that is set on the quiz details page. And then we have points per question, which is set in the quiz builder section of the quiz. The way that works is the question points are weighted essentially to the overall score. So for example, if you set the overall points for your quiz to 50 points and then add 10 questions, they don't each have to be worth 5 points. You can make them worth 1 point. You can make them worth, I don't know, 100 points. You could do something crazy. But for this example, let's just say we have 50 points overall on the quiz details page. That's what's going to appear in the gradebook. And then we have 10 questions, each worth 1 point. If a student were to answer 9 of those correctly, what Canvas is going to do is it's going to add up that points that they earned, so 9 out of 10 points, and then it's going to perform a calculation where it takes that score and multiplies it by the overall points. So 9 out of 10 is 90% of 50 points, or 45 out of 50 is how we get that calculation. What that means is if you have questions that are worth different point values, those will be weighted proportionally to the overall score. So if you have one question worth 1 point and one question worth 100 points, that's obviously going to really factor into that final grade calculation quite heavily. So just be mindful of that as you're setting point values. If this confuses you, what I recommend is to make each question worth the same amount of points, 1 point, 10 points, pick a number, stick with it, and then set your overall score on the quiz details page, and Canvas will take care of the rest. So just wanted to point that out before we jump on in. All right, so we have gotten to the demonstration. Let's take a look. Let's get into Canvas and actually start talking or showing you some of what I've been talking about. So this is my demonstration course. I have a lot of quizzes in here. Quizzes are not labeled classic quiz or new quiz by default. This is just my naming convention so I can keep track of things. But the first thing I want to show you is how you can migrate a quiz. So let's say I have this quiz about snowflakes. This is a classic quiz, and I want to migrate that into new quizzes. How do I do that? So I can come into the quiz. I can click the 3 dots next to it. And then from here, gosh, I always get this messed up. apologies, we can click on the quiz. From here, we can click the three dots. I always mess this up again. Okay, I apologize. The issue was that I was on the assignments page of the course. I know it looks very similar to the quizzes page, but it is not. Where we want to go is the quizzes page of the course. Apologies. I'm still learning this myself. From here, we can click the three dots next to the quiz name, and we can select migrate. There we go. What will happen is we will get a little message at the top that says your quiz is in the process of migrating, and we will see a new quiz shell item show up at the bottom of the page, and it'll kind of just chug along, and you'll get a confirmation message when it's complete. It'll show up at the top of the page, and then you can click into your quiz and see what it looks like. Now, if you are someone who prefers to do all of your quizzes at once, you can do that from the settings page of your course. So once you're here, you'll select import course content. You will then choose the second option here, which is copy a Canvas course. And then you can either select the same course that you're in or a previous course. So you can search for your course here. The important thing to look out for is going to be this checkbox that says convert content to new quizzes. And that will go ahead and copy classic quizzes and migrate them over to new quizzes. Now, one important thing here, if you are copying from your current course into your current course, so you're already in the same course, you selected the same course up here, be mindful to select the specific content button. And then when you do that, you'll be prompted down underneath to select what content you wish to actually copy. In that case, just come in and select quizzes. You don't want to accidentally duplicate all of your course content. If you're confused about that, let me know. Reach out to us and we can definitely get that sorted out for you. Okay, so that was a little bit about migration. I'm going to go back to the assignments page in my course. And what I want to point out here is that build option that I was talking about. It'll make more sense in just a moment. That's still a classic quiz. We know that is a classic quiz because there is no build option. We also know, by the way, it is a classic quiz because the icon next to it is a outlined rocket ship. And I know this is tedious, but I figured I'd point it out. Also, I don't know if you can see this easily, but when I hover over the link at the bottom left corner of my screen, the URL has /assignments in it. If this were a new quiz, like we're going to look at my soap making basics, you'll notice the icon is a filled-in rocket ship. And when we hover over it, that /assignments is still there, but at the very end, it says quiz LTI. That is a new quiz. So just a little tip if you want to see what that looks like or keep track of that. I think the easiest way to keep track of them is actually with three dots. So if I select this, there's an option to build. And this is not an option that appears for classic quizzes. So you can keep an eye out for that, and that'll let you know which one you're working with. Now, I'm actually not going to build this quiz. I want to show you how we would build a new quiz. So to do that, we're going to go to the quizzes page like we would with classic quizzes. And we're going to select the plus quiz button. And it's going to ask us classic quiz or new quiz. In this case, we're not doing classic. We're doing new quizzes. Like I said, if you don't see this, let us know. We can get this resolved for you. But I'm going to go ahead and do a new quiz. I'm going to submit that and it's going to load up. So the first thing we are taken to here, we have the quiz shell created. We're taken to the quiz details page. So this should look pretty familiar, right? So we're going to give it a name. So my demo quiz, fantastic name. We have a point value here where we can set the overall points. So remember, this is going to the grade book. This is what displays there. So maybe this is 100 points, or maybe it's 50 points, or, you know, it depends on your grading scheme. We have some traditional options here for any type of assignment in Canvas. So we can set our assignment group. We can choose how we want our grades to display. We can go ahead and turn on anonymous grading so we don't see who submitted each attempt. And then like normal, we can go ahead and set a due date, availability dates, add exceptions, all that kind of stuff. Now, this is where things get different. So normally you would come down, or you would actually scroll up in classic quizzes, and there'd be a tab here to create your question. In new quizzes, we scroll down and there's a button that says build. So I'm going to go ahead and click this and it's going to load. This is the same page that you would get to if you were on modules, assignments, or quizzes. You click the three dots and click build. It would jump you right to this page, and we would skip the details page before where we set the due date and all that stuff. So we are now in the quiz builder. I will take a second to kind of orient us here in what we're seeing. What we have is tabs along the top. So we have build, settings, moderate, reports, and exports. And then along the left, we have navigation about our quiz. So as we add more and more questions, each question will kind of get a little icon here, and we can click it to quickly jump to that question. We also have some default ones at the top. So the first one will get you to the title, which is up here. And then we have the instructions, which is right below the title. Those are just the default locations and things for that. We'll also see the point values so we can get an idea about what point values are. And then we can click this icon to kind of see the details if you want to see the question titles and things like that. But for our purposes, just going to keep that collapsed. I do also want to point out that we have a preview button here. Once you have questions, you'll be able to use that to see the quiz as an actual student. And then we have the return button at the top, and this will jump you back out to your course. So let's talk about adding questions and building a quiz. The first thing you'll want to do is edit the title. And like I said, this title can differ from the title on the quiz details page. So the name on the quiz details page is the one that's going to appear in modules, on the assignments page, on the quizzes page, and in the gradebook. This title field is pretty much independent. It doesn't necessarily show up anywhere except to the students when they're taking the quiz. So we can put whatever we want here. Underneath that, we have instructions. This is your pretty typical Canvas text box. We can go ahead and type in whatever we need here. We can add images, files, videos, whatever you need for your students to have instructions on the quiz. When we're done, we can click done, or like I said, we can kind of just click off and that will save. I appreciate the confirmation, so I click done. If we need to edit this at any point, we can just click on it, or we can select the pencil icon. Either way will work. Now to add questions, we click this little plus button underneath, and it'll ask us, hey, what question do you want to create? And we can select. So we have all of our typical question types and our new ones. So we have our categorization, we have hotspot, we have fill in the blank, which again, remember, has the consolidated question types. We have stimulus down here. We also have a text block, which is very much just a block of text. So there's no question associated with with a text block. That's very much just like informational. But feel free to explore these and play around with them. Just like in classic quizzes, all of these question types are automatically graded, with the exception of the essay question. So that is one that would require you to grade manually. For our purposes, I will go ahead and create a good old multiple choice question because that is, I think, one that a lot of people use. So once we've selected that, we can see we are in question 1. We have a question title, we have a question stem, and then answers below. Now, obviously, this will vary depending on the question type you create, what options you see, but multiple choice is pretty standard, so we'll go through that. So the question title is really just an organizational piece. Students do not see this. This is really for you as the instructor to organize and find your questions. This is also the title that will appear on the sidebar here if you expand that out. So the question title might be something, it could be like, if it aligns to an objective, it could be about a topic, it could be about whatever you're trying to get out of the question from your students. It could really be about anything. So I'm going to call this one Gummy Bear Colors. And we can then go ahead and write our question stem. So what color of, not a typical bag of gummy bears. And of course, because this is a text editor here, I can make that bold and I can put in a picture of a gummy bear if I had one and whatever I need to put in there. Underneath that, for a multiple choice question, we have our answers. So we can go ahead and select any of these to type in our answers. So there is no blue one. We do have green. We have white. Maybe actually I'll put yellow because white's not really a gummy bear color. It's clear. Maybe those are my 3 answers and I don't want the 4th. So I can go ahead and click the trash can down here next to the 4th. Maybe just kidding, I want that back. I can click plus answer to get another one back, whatever it might be for your case. We can also select the correct answer. So Canvas knows what is correct and it automatically grades that by selecting the radio button next to the correct answer. So blue is our correct answer here. And then if we have any feedback we want to give for specific selected answers, we can go ahead and click the little chat icon here, and that will give us feedback. So like, good job. Blue is not a color, or whatever you wanted to type. And just like before, we can click off and it'll save, or we can click done just to get that confirmation. So I am going to go ahead and click that. Underneath the questions, no matter what question type you are creating, you will see options. So the options will vary depending on the question type that you have, but you should always see the option for a calculator. And then vary points by answer is not one that you see for everything. And then shuffle choices should be, depending on if there's options to shuffle. So you can go ahead and play around with those, see if they meet your needs. Really depends what you're trying to do with your quiz. Underneath that, we have a section aligned to outcomes. Don't worry about that. We don't actually utilize outcomes here at CASE, so not really anything to get into there. And then we also have item banking. So if you are someone who likes to organize your questions, or maybe you have a cumulative final where you want to randomize a bunch of questions from previous quizzes, item banks are definitely for you. So this is where you can assign the question to an item bank by clicking Add to Bank. I'm not going to get into item bank specifics here, but if you want more information, let us know. Moving right along, underneath at the bottom left, we have the option to set our point value for the question. So in this case, maybe I just want it to be 1 point. I can come in and make it 5 points, 10 points, whatever makes sense for me. But 1 is good, so I'll just keep it set there. And then next to that, kind of well hidden in my opinion, we have one more feedback button. So this is a button. If we click on it, this will give you an option to provide feedback for correct answers and incorrect answers, just for the overall question feedback. So it's not answer specific like the ones up next to the answer options. This is just for the whole question. So if they get it correct, if they get it incorrect, or just generally, if you want to provide feedback, you can do that here. In this case, I'm just going to leave those blank. And then we can go ahead and click done, or we can just click off and it'll save. I am going to click done. And at this point, we rinse and repeat. So we can click the plus button up at the top. We click the plus button down below to continue adding questions to our quiz. When we are ready to give the quiz, I always recommend previewing it. So I'm going to go ahead and click that now so you can see what that actually looks like. This will give you an idea of what the students will see. So they can come in, they can click submit. Yeah, I want to submit. It's going to grade it and provide me feedback. So I got it right. Awesome. Yep, there's the feedback we put in. So the preview is really helpful. Good way to kind of get that idea of what the quiz looks like. Now, Before we leave the builder, I want to talk about the other tabs at the top of the page because this is really where you get into all the fun stuff with your quizzes. So we have settings at the top, and settings, there's a lot of them, are where we can come in and adjust the settings for the quiz. So do we want to shuffle all of our questions? Do we want to shuffle all of our answers? Maybe we can turn that on. We can present questions one at a time instead of all of them at once. We can set up a password if we need that. We can do time limits. This is a new one. I have not seen this one before. Oh, I have seen this one before. This is what happens if a student accidentally opens up the quiz twice. So you'll just get a little message on their quiz log saying, hey, they were in the quiz twice at the same time, which I haven't seen happen personally. That's not to say it couldn't happen. Filter IP addresses is an option. Do not turn this on. It's just going to cause problems. You can turn on a calculator for the overall quiz. So students will see a button at the top where they can open a calculator. There is an option to clear the selection for multiple choice question. So students will see a button that says clear and it'll just remove their selection. There is an option for customized feedback with the results. So when they see that final, like you got 1 out of 1 questions correct, it'll show feedback on that page. There is an option to disable document uploads. You don't want students to be able to attach a file to like an essay question or something like that. Multiple attempts, if you want to give them unlimited attempts. And then the most interesting one that I will talk about a little more in depth here is hide results from students. So this is where you can turn off that after summary that students see. So if you have hide results from students selected, they won't see anything after they finish. They will see a message that says, this has been hidden from you for right now. Check back later. There's other options here. So if you want them to see the questions that were in the quiz, you can get that set up. If you want them to see how many points were available to them, you can have that set. And then how many points were awarded to them, you can have that set as well. Now, I do want to have one caveat here, and I probably should have put this on the slides. If you have, whether or not you have this checkbox selected, students can still see their grade on the grade page. So they can go to their grades and see how they performed on the quiz overall. Now, they may not be able to see the questions depending on what toggle you have here. But even if you are hiding the results from students, they will still see the grade. So if that is important to you that they do not see their score afterwards, you also need to go into the gradebook and set a manual posting policy for the quiz. I am going to put that on the slides after this. If that's confusing to you, or if you don't know what that means to set a post policy, let me know. Contact us. We will definitely get that resolved for you. But this is where you can come in and kind of toggle when students see what, if they see feedback, all that good stuff. So the next area I want to talk about just briefly is the moderate page. This is where you can come in and set accommodations for your students if they need an additional attempt, something like that. So for example, Abigail Portfolium here has a time multiplier 1.75 times. Maybe that's an accommodation she has. We can set that by using the, not the pencil. I always get this one mixed up too, sorry. This is where we can set multiple attempts. So if they need to take it again or something like that. And do any specific one-off time. So let's say just for this one, like we know that she's going to have an issue with connectivity or something and she needs twice as long. So we can do that. If you want to set an accommodation for all quizzes, it's not the pencil, it is the name. And this is where you can come in and say, hey, they get a multiplier, they get so many extra minutes. There's also an option to reduce answer choices. So instead of like 4 multiple choice options, they would see 3. Optional. But to get to that, select the student's name. So that is handy. I will also point out that there's a speed grader button. sprinkled across these pages. So if you want to launch SpeedGrader and grade your quizzes, you can do that. The reports page is where you can come to generate reports and see the results on how your students performed overall, or how your quiz performed overall. And then there's also an exports tab if you need to export your quiz for some reason. Most people don't, so it's there. When we're ready to get back to our course, of course, we can use our menu here, but we can also use the return button just to jump us back out. Now, one thing to make note of is our quiz published? Always something that we want to keep in mind with anything in Canvas. So just keep in mind, after you are done building and you're ready to go, to publish the quiz so that students can get in there and see it and access everything. So that is my quick little demo for you on how to create new quizzes, do migration, kind of all those things to watch out for in there. Before we wrap up, I want to share a little bit about the resources we have available for this transition. So the first link in here is our New Quizzes Hub. That is our website. So you can just search CWRU New Quizzes on Google or something, and that'll pop up. That is where we're posting all of our updates. So if we do end up adjusting the time frame or adding new resources, they will be published there. This middle section here is the Canvas guides. That is instructors' documentation on how to use new quizzes. You can also get to that from the help button in Canvas. There's a link there for the guides. That would be all of your step-by-step instructions on how to use new quizzes. So if you are curious about setting up like a fill-in-the-blank question, they would have a whole guide about how to set up fill-in-the-blank questions. Or if you don't necessarily understand all of the options on the settings page, they would have a guide that explains all of the settings on the settings page. And then the final one here is our new quizzes guides. Those are really specific things that I've put together to help communicate about this. Again, that includes like the considerations page, tripping points, known issues, also kind of a companion piece to this presentation. So it's got basically the whole demo I did just in written form. So it kind of walks you through the whole setup process. So that's definitely useful if you want to take a look. And then finally, how do you get help? Obviously, this is a lot of information, and learning any new feature is tricky. So how can we help you with that? How do you get that assistance? You can, of course, contact the UTech service desk. So that is your 368-HELP or help@case.edu number. You can go to help.case.edu if you prefer to chat with someone instead. And that's available 24/7 a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If they can't immediately assist you, it will be assigned over to the Canvas support team. So the Canvas support team can also be reached directly by emailing canvashelp@case.edu. So that gets in front of me and my colleagues so we can answer your questions. We are not 24/7, so we will get you a response usually on the next business day. Or maybe the same business day, depending on what time of the day. And then, of course, we have instructors support resources. Those are all available under the help button. So again, the guides are up there. You can chat, you can email, you can phone call. And they are available also 24/7. So feel free to reach out if you need assistance with that. Yeah, so that concludes this presentation on Introduction to New Quizzes. I appreciate you watching this recording if you're taking the time to do that. I look forward to hearing from you if you have questions or things you're thinking about new quizzes. I would be more than happy to talk those through with you. Let us know if you need help. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.